Hey everyone, it's Simon Mainwaring here from WeFirst. I'm the CEO and founder of WeFirst. Thank you so much for some time here on a Friday morning. If you're on the East Coast in the US, you're dangerously close to the weekend and hopefully a glass of wine at sunset. It's Friday morning here on the West Coast here in LA, and we've got lots of people who joined us from around the world. So thank you so much for your time. The idea today is to share some thinking, and just in case, you wanted some credibility to the information we're going to share, we assembled the world's largest collection of books behind me to lend credibility to the experience. Only kidding. Today's whole webinar is really about sharing information that we've learned the hard way by working with some of the most exciting brands, the leading purposeful brands out there in terms of how your brand becomes a high growth movement. Now, this time is, yes, to share some information, but more importantly, it's to answer your questions. So please, you've seen the instructions a moment ago. If you have a question, type it in and we're going to answer all those questions at the end. So we'll definitely get to them. And even if we don't get to your question, we'll answer them via email later on. So please volunteer the questions specific to your brand so that we can really offer the most value that we can for your time that you're giving us here. And so the topic today is how to turn your brand into a high growth movement. And why is that important? Well, I've been an ad guy for 20 years, 25 years, whoops. And, the one thing I've noticed is a big shift from really building your business by building your brand and awareness of your brand to really seeing your brand as a movement and allowing that movement to build your business. And that's a reaction to the reality we now find ourselves in, which is that we are living in this era of movements, whether it's Me Too, Black Lives Matter, March for Our Lives. All these movements in the cultural landscape have now been effectively mapped across to the business landscape. And that has huge implications for brands. It's really given brands an opportunity to really stand up for what their values are. At the same time, it's put those brands at risk that aren't really clear about what they stand for. And as such, brands are being increasingly defined by their values, and their products are being positioned as social proof of their values. And the impact that they have, whether it's CSR or philanthropy or what they do with their employees through volunteering, what used to be viewed as philanthropy or CSR is now being really seen as skin in the game in terms of bringing your core values to life. So with that as context, let's look at how what's going on in the cultural landscape has mapped across to the business landscape. I mean, here you see on the left, you've got the Women's March and Gun Control March, these things that are playing out so publicly amongst citizens and consumers. And now we're seeing, for example, movements being led by consumers. For example, delete Uber when there are issues around the behavior of leadership and other issues inside Uber, or people being concerned about privacy with Facebook. And so here we are with these generations of consumers that have grown up with intuitive technology who are now saying to themselves, I want to support brands that are actually part of the solution, not part of the problem, and we're going to take a stand to that effect. And as a result, you're seeing many leading brands get ahead of this opportunity and articulate a very clear movement as to what they stand for. And they've all got complex marketing, they've got digital and social channels, they've got so many different audiences and so on. But if they've all distilled down everything they're doing to a very singular conversation they're leading out there, a movement that's being driven by a conversation. So you see Patagonia focused on responsible economy, like how do we grow and be responsible to the planet? Tesla, they want to enable sustainable transportation. Unilever, with sustainable living. Airbnb, universal belonging. And in the fashion category, Everlane with radical transparency. It's very different to even 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago, where you'd really see brands talking about themselves or their products. Now you see them talking about issues larger than themselves. And that makes them meaningful and relevant to your life, when the reality is you don't want to be advertised to. You don't want more ads in your Facebook stream. You don't want more ads in your Twitter stream. You actually just want to engage with those brands who care about the same things and are showing up in your life in a meaningful way. And this is not just my opinion. This is, backed up by data. I mean, one of the great sources that we always point to is, Edelman's earned brand study from November 2017 last year. And there was 3 data points in there that I found really interesting, which I haven't seen before. We all know about consumers are willing to they want brands that do good, and in some cases they're willing to pay a premium for them. But here, what they found was that amongst belief-driven buyers, and that's loosely qualified or characterized as younger, affluent folks that are about 30% of the global population, 50% of belief-driven buyers would buy or boycott a brand based on its position on a social or political issue. That's what does my head in. A social or political issue. Not a business issue, not a brand issue, not a product issue, not a supply chain issue, but a social or political issue. Also, 65% of belief-driven buyers will not buy a brand if they stayed silent. So if you're trying to sit there on the fence, if you're trying to kind of Madeline Albright it and have one foot on both sides of the fence, if you're trying to kind of keep all types of stakeholders and potential customers or consumers happy, it's actually not going to work for you, because both sides will feel that you're not genuine in your commitment. And then thirdly, 67% of belief-driven buyers have bought a brand for the first time based on their position on a controversial issue. Their position on a controversial issue. Great example, Starbucks years ago, Howard Schultz got up there at the annual shareholder meeting when someone was challenging him about, their stance on same-sex marriage. He said, listen, if you don't believe in people's right to choose who they want to love and marry, feel free to sell your shares. A very bold position, but at the same time, it does alienate some of those potential customers. It very much deepens the relationship with those loyalists who then become advocates for the brand. So with that in mind, with that as context, with that as not only from a data point of view, but anecdotally, what you see around you in the world, just open the paper, look at your Facebook feed every day, look at the response to what's happening with Facebook and their share price right now in response to privacy issues. We know this to be a living and breathing reality in which we as brands need to operate. So in that context, what do? Well, we get very clear about what our purpose is. If we want to become a movement, our purpose is like a slingshot. It's a slingshot that propels that movement. So if you haven't worked out what your purpose is, you're kind of handicapping yourself. Now that purpose defines the movement, and that movement defines the actions you take, whether it's activism, whether it's advocacy, and yes, in your communications, advertising. And those actions build your business. So again, a shift from building your business by purely raising awareness of your brand to really recharacterizing your brand as a movement that in turn builds your business. So with that in mind, I guess in simple terms, the fundamental shift is moving away from brand building in isolation to movement making, And that sounds like simple language, semantics or whatever. But as you could probably imagine, if you do make that shift in your mind's eye, everything becomes different. If you sit down at any one of your planning or strategy or marketing meetings, whether you're a solopreneur or whether you've got 10,000 people all around the world, and you say, we're in the business of movement making as opposed to building our brand, you can imagine how extraordinary the shift will be in the type of ideas you come up with, the type of solutions that end up as a result. And so with that as context, with the ambition of becoming a movement maker, what are the kind of 3 fundamental steps to getting there? And again, what we're sharing today is not sort of theory or thought leadership. We're lucky enough to work with some of the truly great purposeful brands out there, from Tom's to Virgin to Timberland to 7th Generation and so on. So this is really based on direct real world experience, and that's why we hope it's of value to you. So the first part is defining your brand purpose. And there's a lot of language out there when it comes to purpose, and there's a lot of conversation around it by brands, which is a good thing, but let's be very clear about what it means. It's your why, it's your reason for being, it's why you exist. And it should really not just connect with the head, it should connect with the heart and the hands. It should be a motivation for people to kind of roll up their sleeves and do something, to think in a different way, and also that emotional connection. And that way it'll be real to all stakeholders. And let's look at some examples of brand purpose statements. And what I'd like you to notice about these is how simple they are. You've got these incredibly complex businesses with global footprints, and here yet they've distilled down their purpose, the reason they exist, down to very short sentences. And the second thing I'd like you to notice is each one of them are in the business of something fundamentally emotional. So Airbnb is not in the accommodation business, they're in the belonging business. Kellogg's is in the nourishing business. PwC is in the trust business. Disney's in the imagination business. And Southwest is in the freedom business. And the reason that's so powerful is no matter what changes with your business in terms of your products or services over time, your movement can be consistent, because really what you're speaking to is a fundamental human attribute or emotion that remains constant, no matter how it's brought to life through that movement. And another distinction I want to make is that too often, when people think about their brand and their purpose, they consciously or not sort of default to this idea that it's some public-facing thing. It's this CSR and comms exercise, communications exercise. But as you can imagine, if the definition in pure terms is why you exist, it should really affect all aspects of your business, from your product development, to your supply chain, to your culture, to your research and development, and yes, community engagement and all your CSR initiatives. So you've got to be very, very clear as to the emotional, simple, kind of fundamental attribute that defines your purpose, and then it's got to inform all aspects of your business. And so how do you define that purpose? It's a great question, and there's lots of great folks out there who, write about this and offer this as a service. Here are 3 of the questions that we find absolutely critical when doing this work. The first is, what is your enemy? When you sit there trying to define your purpose, sometimes it's sort of trying to articulate something that you've always known, but you've never really had to say out loud. And it's hard to read the label from inside the jar sometimes. It's hard to see yourself from outside yourself so that you can articulate it in a way that other people will understand it. So one of the most powerful places to start is, well, what's your enemy? What's that thing that makes you so mad it gets you out of bed in the morning? For me, with We First, it was the me first mentality that informed business at large and the global economic meltdown that happened in 2007, 2008. Wall Street fell apart, Main Street fell apart. It affected our hopes, our homes, our healthcare. It bled over to Iceland and Greece and the Gulf states and all around the world. And it pissed me off, pardon the French, being an Australian. And so, when you look at these examples here with Tesla, it's unsustainable transportation, the combustion engine. With Airbnb, it's the homogenized hotel experience. With Uber, it's that glorious suspension challenge experience in the back of a taxi. And so define what your enemy is, because that can be the counterpoint, the springboard against which you define what your purpose is in a positive sense. Secondly, what makes you you? We've been lucky enough to work with great leading entrepreneurs like Blake at Toms and Sir Richard Branson. And, as an example of what makes you you, with Blake at Toms, we're in a conversation at one point when we were working with them, and I was actually the interim CMO for 5 months in there. And I asked Blake, why did you start the company? And he said, I didn't want to start a company. I wanted to get some shoes on that kid's feet. What I realized was their defining quality really was empathy. And the enemy that they were working against was apathy. This idea that there's nothing you can do to make a difference. It's not, their enemy wasn't bare feet. Their enemy was apathy. And I had the chance to teach, do some CEO training out at Necker Island last year. And when I got the chance to speak to Richard a few times, he explained, that really the defining quality for Virgin is a sense of family. And I think when you think about your experience with all the different Virgin brands, it makes sense that you're treated in a way with a relatedness that's typically reserved for someone who's like a family member. So, what makes you you? Is it empathy? Is it family? These are just fundamental, simple human things that help define your purpose. And then thirdly, what are you the only of? There are lots of different people that do what you do. Every different category out there is crowded, absolutely crowded. But there's only one of you. There's only one of your team. There's only one of the products and services that you offer. There's only one of the market and the competitive landscape you're in. And when you combine all those, unique inputs, what are you the only of? What are you doing when you have that enormously successful day where you're in your sweet spot, you're all high-fiving each other, or if you're alone, solopreneur, you're high-fiving yourself in the mirror, which isn't weird. There's lots of weird things that go on as a solo entrepreneur. What are you the only of? So those 3 questions are some of the questions we ask. What is your enemy? What are you the only of, and so on. So if I was to ask, if you were to say, what is the key question I could ask myself right now? What is the key question to empower you to define your purpose? I would say, what is your enemy? What is that thing that boils your blood high enough and consistently enough that it can propel your brand to become a movement that will be meaningful and relevant to everyone out there in society? Because that in turn will build your business. Second stage of helping your brand become a high growth movement is co-creating a brand community. And the key word there is co-creating. I notice, especially with smaller brands that are under-resourced and always punching above their weight, they feel even more so than large brands this onus to do it all themselves, to take it all upon themselves. And they've got to kind of, at the end of all their other circumstances and demands on their time, somehow they've got to be this 10x marketing department. That's the wrong way of thinking about it. You need to think instead, how can you mobilize everyone in your brand community to be an extension of your marketing department? Everyone from your employees to leadership, to partners, to customers, to consumers, to the media. How can everyone create that brand community? And to do that, there's three key strategies. The first is co-authorship. Don't feel like you need to sit there in a vacuum and come up with it all yourself. Design your brand in a way that people are going to work with you. The very nature of your outreach is going to inspire people to work with you in a way that is going to get them engaged and inspire them to share what you're doing. So for example, UPS does a lot of great work out there, particularly on the sustainability front, and their platform Committed to More. If you go to their website, you'll see that they ask you 8 questions. For example, here, which volunteer project suits you best? And when you answer these 8 questions, they make a contribution to a nonprofit that aligns with what you've shared. And you literally co-author that contribution in the context of the goals you see that they have there on the right. Their goals in terms of their 2020 community goals, their workforce goals, and their environmental goals. So you're co-authoring that engagement, and obviously it makes sense. You're engaged because it's about you. Secondly, once you've co-authored the engagement, co-create the content because it will increase amplification. And what I mean by that is, we're all time poor and we're all typically looking at things that are relevant to us. And I don't mean to overgeneralize, but human beings by nature are more interested in things about them perhaps than other people. So if you allow people to play a co-creative role in their content, they're much more likely to share it with others. And here you see an example of Dove, which has built so much resonance over the years with regards to the Real Beauty campaign. One of their more recent social experiments was they put up these 2 doors around the world, 2 signs. One said average, one says beautiful. And they, videoed ladies walking through one of the 2 doors. And it was all about an exercise in sort of self-perception of beauty. And the very nature of treating their marketing not so much as an ad campaign, but as a social experiment that involved people. And you see a lot of different ladies around the world talking about how you got to change the way you think and choose beautiful. That's the type of content people will share because they're a part of it. And you see there, they've got their 232,000 women at that point around the world who have consciously chosen beautiful. So co-creation increases your ability to inspire people to share that content. And by the way, do keep the questions coming. I see some of the questions lining up and I'll be answering those at the end. So fire away with the questions specific to your brand or category so you get the best use of the time you're investing this morning. And the third sort of strategy in terms of co-creating your brand community is collaboration. So don't think about doing it on your own. Think about how you can do it with a competitor. Think about how you can do it with a nonprofit partner. Think about how in the public and private sector can work together. Here's a simple example here where, Tom's has for years done their One Day Without Shoes exercise where you take your shoes off and take a photo of your feet and you post it with the hashtag and a pair of shoes is given to a person in need. And there you see on the right, Christy Turlington, who does a lot of incredible work for mothers in the developing world, participating in the movement and amplifying the movement with her community. So it's not only reaching out and doing something simple with your community, it's collaborating with Christy Turlington there, and also Priya, who used to work with Tom's, wonderful human being out there making a difference as well. So co-authorship, co-creation, and collaboration. And again, in the context of movement making, if this becomes your mindset, it will absolutely transform the type of ideas you come up with, the type of engagement you seek, the content you put out there, the way you respond to that content. And it's kind of like taking everything you've known about marketing for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years and turning it inside out, because you're shifting from being self-directed to being community-focused. And instead of taking it all upon yourself, you're inviting everyone to work with you to achieve something based on shared values and a common goal. So the key question here is, what is one way that you can co-create community? One way. Example, ask your employees about what they would like to work on a volunteer day. That will make them more engaged. Ask your consumers, what is a new product or an innovation in existing products that they would like to see? Ask your customers how you can better serve them. Is there a market gap, a product gap that they need? Take this collaborative, co-creative mindset, and when you do, suddenly everyone will be working to build your business with you. And you have that magical moment where you stop one day and you stop rowing and pulling the oars on the boat and the boat keeps going and you're like, how did that happen? It's because you've built a self-sustaining brand community. And then the third area of becoming a brand movement, a high growth brand movement, is really, well, how do you lead that movement? If you've got your purpose in place and it's the slingshot that propels you out there, and you've got that kind of co-creative mindset and you're leveraging those dynamics to inspire every stakeholder to work with you, how do you lead that movement? And as you can imagine, it's cascading in a sense from leadership all the way down. And just a few of the key areas that you should focus on is, firstly, be very clear about the conversation you're leading in the world. The good news is that a lot of brands are making a difference out there now, or at least speaking to making a difference. And yes, some are doing it genuinely and some are doing it disingenuously. And then there's that middle ground where some brands are just repackaging or reverse engineering their existing CSR or foundation efforts and packaging them up as sort of a movement but there's always going to be that sliding scale, and there's no right or wrong. As long as a brand is making an impact and they can be slowly upgraded in terms of authenticity over time, we're up for it. So here are 4 examples of brands leading cultural conversations that drive movement. So you've got Patagonia with a responsible economy. How do we grow responsibly in the context of a planet of finite resources? Ben & Jerry's, they're committed to so many different issues. They're part of the Unilever family. They're committed to GMOs and climate change and so many other things. But they've built a movement where everyone, including their own stakeholders, but even partners, rally around the values they share. REI, 3 years ago, they launched their Opt Outside movement, and now it's taken a life of its own, where upwards of 400 different companies also shut their doors on Black Friday and encourage everyone to go outside. So getting outdoors, what are the benefits of that in the context of a screen life, which is leading to loneliness, obesity, sedentary lifestyle? So there's some real power in that conversation that they're leading. And Airbnb with universal belonging, you've got xenophobia out there, you've got a lot of intolerance and a lack of compassion on the national landscape here in the US sometimes, and obviously around the world, and they're really playing a meaningful role in that dialogue. So, as you're thinking about your brand as a movement that wants to drive growth, you've got to engage in these relevant and resonant conversations with consumers. Once you do that, well, where are the active moving parts to bring that to life? Well, firstly, you've got to lead by example. So here you see a very dramatic example with Patagonia around the public lands issue and their CEO, where basically, Yves Chenard and the company came out and said public lands are for everyone. They shouldn't be opened up to mining rights. And this is specifically focused on the Bears Ears issue at the time. But they took a very dramatic and protagonist response, which was, to have their website taken over with the message, the president stole your land, and suing the president and launching an advocacy site to help people align with nonprofits that are supporting, public lands and access to them. So you've got to lead by example. You don't have to be necessarily as protagonist in nature. It's got to suit the tone of your brand, but you have to lead by example because it's a permission slip to everyone else inside your organization. And also, it sends a very clear message out to the world. Secondly, you don't just tell your employees what's going on. You've got to mobilize your employees. You've got to put them to work. Here you see both Ben & Jerry's and Apple getting out there in support of, gay pride and really allowing their employees to celebrate the values that are important to them as individuals, as employees, and as a company. So, when you're thinking in the context of a movement, yes, the word movement is a noun, but the very nature of the noun is it's a movement. You're moving somewhere. Get people moving. It's not some lazy, static purpose statement that sits on a wall or in an annual report. It needs to be a visceral, active, daily practice. It needs to be a full contact sport. And so get your employees mobilized. And then to support your purpose and to keep the movement alive, to keep that balloon in the air, you've got to create rituals. So, REI has this annual ritual of opting outside on Black Friday. What are those rituals that you can establish inside your company? It's interesting, Amazon Prime just had their big Amazon Day the other day, and it's not so much purposeful, but they're launching their own sales holiday. A purposeful example might be Giving Tuesday, where once a year, people all around the world are allowed to pair with nonprofits to make a difference in the world. And then be accountable. You absolutely cannot go to market on the strength of your purpose and stated values and lead a movement if you're not willing to kind of withstand the scrutiny that you're inviting. And it's interesting, it's very instructive to see what happened with Starbucks, who in 2015 launched their Race Together campaign. So they already took this issue head on, and they took a lot of flack. At the time, all their ads to celebrate Race Together, as I understood it, were only featured people with white hands. And that was very much called out by the public on Twitter. And, they took a lot of hits on many levels, and then at the same time, You've got to be accountable when something goes wrong. Like there was racial profiling that took place in one of their stores not so long ago. And to the credit of the brand, they quickly responded. The CEO took ownership of it, and they went about doing training and closing 8,000 of their stores. They went about doing training to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And now they're working with the two gentlemen who were sadly profiled, and to create a program that will help Starbucks and other companies move beyond those sorts of challenges. And then most importantly, if you want to become a movement, a high growth movement, one of the really important areas that a lot of brands overlook, even when they've done all these other things right, is that they drop the ball at the last mile of the story supply chain. And what I mean by that is we all know about a product supply chain. You get your materials, you put it all together, you ship it somewhere, you take it to market, you make some profit and so on, you go and rinse and repeat. There's a story supply chain now where if your supply chain must demonstrate your values, if your culture must demonstrate your values, if your marketing must demonstrate your values, you've got to be telling that story all the way through. And too many brands do this amazing, impactful work, yet they fail to tell the story of that work at the end. And what does that cost them? Firstly, it robs them of the ROI, the credit of actually doing that work if they present it in a sort of community-facing way rather than a self-directed way. But it disencourages or disincentivizes everybody else to ever be involved again, because they put this effort in, whether you're an employee volunteering or you put this effort in if you're a consumer out there doing something and buying a product as a conscious choice because it's responsible. If you don't tell them that effort was important, that collaborative effort was important, it was meaningful to the brand, if you don't tell that story, why on earth would they turn up again? Why on earth would they bother to show up and do it again? Their experience of it will be that their effort, their heartfelt concern, their alignment around shared values fell on deaf ears. And so you see brands out there very consciously telling their story. So Philips, a large B2B brand, really talking about improving the life of every fourth person on the planet. You've got Nike talking about better world on so many different levels. And you've got Gap with their One Stitch Closer campaign where they're celebrating women entrepreneurs around the world and telling their story. So, everything I'm sharing with you today is a build. Everything I'm sharing with you is a build in the sense that you've got to define your purpose in the first place. That has to be a slingshot that allows you to co-create a brand community, leveraging those strategies of co-authorship and co-creation and collaboration. And then once you've got those things in place, the conversation you're leading as a function of your purpose should propel this movement. And when you're doing that, to propel that movement, you've got to keep the movement alive on all these different levels, from leadership to your internal culture, to your brand community, to really what you're saying above and beyond your industry out in the world. And when you do that, you've got to share that story so that people recognize you as a voice of authority on that issue. And that's how you kind of rise above the clutter in terms of, all the people talking about the purpose these days. And I just wanted to share, before I go to questions, an interesting example, a very recent example where, I think it's a very powerful partnership and it demonstrates 90% of the things I'm talking about. And that's the partnership that North Face and Sky Ocean Rescue and National Geographic announced a few weeks ago. I think one of the huge challenges in our lives, in our personal lives, will be the role of plastic moving forward, not only for the oceans and, waste all around the planet and what it does to animals and how it's showing up even in our own food and the water bottles we consume and the water in it. It's going to come to a point of critical mass where something has to change. And on the strength of this partnership, National Geographic put a cover out there last month, which literally distilled the issue down to very simple terms: planet or plastic. Planet or plastic. And the North Face has committed to this issue, and they've got a whole bunch of branded apparel and collateral that goes with that. And then they're working with Sky Ocean Rescue to really address the issue of plastic and recycling in the world. And Sky Rescue is such an expert in this area, and they provide a lot of the sort of research and on the ground, boots on the ground experience to support the movement. And so let's look at some of these elements here. You've got a very clear purpose, a very clear role that the brand's going to play in terms of addressing this issue. They're leading a very large cultural conversation around this issue. They are co-creating a movement and providing collateral, a badge that people can wear, literally in terms of the clothing and the apparel and so on. And when you buy North Face, you know that you're supporting this issue. and they're substantiating their credibility in around this issue through, you know, all the dense research and experience that Sky Ocean Rescue has. And so what they're really doing is they're looking at the marketplace and saying, well, what materially affects our supply chain? What is really having an impact on the outdoors, which we love and celebrate as the North Face? And who are those partners that we can work with to really address an issue in simple terms that can become a movement that everyone can rally around? And in this case, it's planet or plastic. And I think, you know, this is going to be one of the tentpole issues in all of our lives moving forward, all around the planet. And for a brand to align itself around this is a very, very powerful, strategic, and meaningful move at this point. And they look to be approaching it with great authenticity and commitment. And I think, you know, this is a great example of everything that I've been talking about. And so the key question in this third section in terms of how to turn your brand into a high growth movement is, what movement will you lead? And each one of these questions could be answered in isolation, but in the same way they build on each other, it's good to do them in succession. So if you define what your purpose is, and you look at one way that you can co-create a brand community, on the strength of that, you can ask yourself, well, what movement will you lead? And look at your category and what the key issues are. Look at your brand and, you know, what issues are affected in the manufacture and distribution of your products. Ask yourself as a group and as individuals, as founders, as solopreneurs, what do you care about? And triangulate all these different issues to articulate for yourself what a movement is that can really be unique to your brand, that you're fully qualified to lead and speak to. And once you do that, you can go to market with confidence that you will create fresh content, you will create content that people want to share, you'll be demonstrating values in a way that people will align around those values. And all of that will invest your products with the values and the social. Your products will become social proof of what you care about. So people will want to buy your products to see you succeed. They will want to wear or, you know, use your products because it becomes an expression of what they stand for. And that's when it all becomes very, very powerful. So in terms of a summary of those three key questions that we, through all our experience over the last 7 years of working with so many leading brands in and around purpose, three key questions you can ask yourself is, what is your enemy? What is one way you can co-create a community, and then expand on that, and there'll be more ways over time. And then what movement will you lead? And if you had to break those steps down into, you know, three key steps, especially if you're a young company or a social enterprise going to market for the first time, launch is a critical moment in time. And the mindset with which you should come to that is to leverage purpose to drive profit in terms of this virtuous cycle between doing good and doing well. In days past, you would do well, and if you had a bit of money left, you might write a check to a nonprofit or whatever it might be, and that would be doing good. The same two pieces are involved, doing well and doing good, but the polarity of that is reversed. It's now do good, and that will allow you to do well. So you've got to lead with doing good. Why? Because younger demographics want to see you doing good in the world. Why? Because consumer social technologies like Facebook and Google, the web and so on have connected people, and they're more aware of the social challenges we face like climate change than ever before. Why? Because so many brands out there are actually demonstrating what they stand for. And if you don't compete in terms of what is driving today's marketplace, you're inviting irrelevance. So leverage your purpose to drive profit in a virtuous cycle of doing good so you can do well. And then secondly, build. Inspire brand champions to co-create your community. So the whole idea of co-creating community is developing strategies or leveraging strategies that will turn any stakeholder and every stakeholder into a brand champion or advocate. What does that mean? They share your content. What does that mean? They talk about you to your friends. What does that mean? When they walk down the street and they see 10 different stores to walk in that, you know, might sell the same product, consciously or not, they go, I'm going to walk in the door of your store. Why? Because consciously or not, they like what you stand for. They've seen you out there. They've seen you talking about a conversation that is meaningful or relevant to their life, rather than just talking at them or try to sell at them. Because all the data shows that no one trusts advertising anymore. They don't want to be sold at. And in fact, they will be turned off by a brand that does that. And then thirdly, to scale your movement, shift your mindset from marketing to movement making. Shift your mindset to advocacy and activism. Shift your mindset to serving something higher than yourself with integrity and authenticity, and let your marketing serve that end. Let your content serve that end. Put your channels to work to best achieve that result. And your brand will ring true in terms of its authenticity, and people will want to be a part of it. And I share all this in the context of something we just launched, We First Works. You know, the big challenge for We First is if our mission is to help business become a force for good, there's both the high-end consulting we do with large brands, but then there's also a lot of companies out there of different size that want this expertise, that want this support without having to pay, you know, high consulting fees for it. And so in the last 6 months, we put together something that we're really excited and proud of. We took all the learnings that we've developed over the last, 7 years and distilled them down to courses. And one course is how to define and activate your personal purpose. And the second is how to define and activate your company purpose. And I tell you, as someone who spent 20 years living other versions of success, in the ad business and other industries, I came to a crisis when I was in my late 30s with a young family, and I was trying to work out what on earth I was supposed to do with my life and why wasn't I happy. And, it doesn't matter what the details were, but really taking the time to articulate my purpose and write a book about it transformed my life. And I think a lot of us in life are looking for fulfillment. We're looking for significance with what we do with our time and our time on this planet. And to achieve that, with all the other things going on in our lives, you need to put some focused attention on what you're here to do. And that's hard to do. It's really hard to see yourself so clearly. So defining and activating your personal purpose is a course that walks you through the process that we've developed over the last 7 years that we've done with so many executives, and it's incredibly accessible from a cost point of view. The enrollment ends on August 31st, so, I wouldn't wait. And you'll also hear from a lot of different levels of entrepreneurs. You hear from all of our insights, but you'll hear from Rick Ridgway at Patagonia, the VP of Environmental Initiatives. You'll hear from Linda Weinman, who's the founder of lynda.com that sold to LinkedIn, that then sold to Microsoft. You'll hear from Jordan Glassberg, who's the VP of Business Development at Tom's. So you'll be hearing from these incredible, established, credentials, experienced entrepreneurs and business people, as well as entrepreneurs like Lunray and Jackie. So, we run the gamut in terms of giving you a line of sight about how to do this, both on a personal level and then on a company level. There's nothing more powerful to rally an organization than to align around shared values and to really be a movement out there in the marketplace. And we walk you through the process that we take companies through when we work with them to achieve that. So, this is about making it available to you in the most accessible way possible so that you can succeed. And the more you succeed, you can have a greater impact, positive impact in the world. And that's the intent behind it. And so I really invite you to visit wefirstworks.com. You'll see all the details there. Very simple, wefirstworks.com. And check that out. And I just know it'll be incredibly valuable to you. We put a lot of effort into making sure it was the highest quality support at the most accessible price point. So we really hope that's of value. So let's go to your questions. And we've got a bunch of questions here. So thank you. Thank you to everyone joining. And then, so we got one from Chris. Chris says, my site my site is a movement, and it's designed to develop the ability to be kind and loving towards others. The potential impact is worldwide in every facet of life. So how do I turn this into a movement? Chris has got a great question there, which is like, when the very definition of what you do is broad, which is to empower people to be kind and loving towards yourself and others, how do you define that into a movement? And let me give you an example, and then I'll get specific to your issue. So there's many, many brands out there that are competing with others who are trying to make a difference in the world. So how many brands are talking about helping or improving the environment? Every single company these days, on the strength of their sustainability credentials, seems to be doing that. I think what you need to do is to get very, very specific. So what do I mean by that? In the cancer area, so many brands are addressing cancer or raising money for cancer research. Yet, for example, with Livestrong, you see that they're focused very much on cancer survivorship. They're very much focused on not only the cancer sufferer who's recovering, but also those who are taking care of them, the caretakers as well. So that's a specific point of view. When it comes to your site, and what you want to do in terms of love and kindness, you need to get very clear and focused about what is unique about your offering in that area. It's the broader topic is enabling people to become loving and kind. But what is unique to your brand in terms of helping them achieve that? So you need to go 2 or 3 steps further in terms of specificity. You need to challenge yourself to go, if that's the context, what's my point of view within the context? The same way that Live Strong is focused on survivorship, or North Face is really focused on plastic and ocean cleanup. So you've got to, even though your broader category is absolutely right, your point of view on that and your service offering and how your solution to achieve that needs to be framed in much more specific terms. So I hope that helps. And, that's when you can ask yourself, well, what are we the only of? And when we're at our best, what are we doing? And these sorts of questions that force you to get more refined, finer and finer and finer in your articulation as to what your brand is, so that people, they understand the broader category of being loving and kind, but they also go, oh, wow, here's a point of view that seems very clear and distinct in the context of everyone else out there. We've got a question from Christian. For brands just starting, coming out of the gate, at what point does it make sense to build community? It's often very difficult to keep running and growing from a follower and community building point of view. One of the great challenges these days is twofold, especially if you're a young company. We all have limited bandwidth, and it takes so much effort to create all this content, to put tweets and posts and all these different things out there. That's one challenge. The other challenge is there's so much noise because there's so many other brands doing it. So how do you cut through that clutter? And I'd love to say that there's a silver bullet, but there's not. You need to actually get very clear about what your purpose is. So you've got that passion to fuel what you do. You need to get very clear about what your point of view is on the conversation you're going to lead, which is relevant to the last question. And then you need to commit to creating content consistently that supports that. But the good news is that most brands are not purposeful. And the good news is that even those that are purposeful often talk about themselves in a self-directed way. Look at what our brand is doing. Look at what we stand for. Look at the hours we volunteer. But if you turn it around and say, here's my company, and this is what it can do for you, and here's how we can work together to support someone, and this is how it'll change their lives. If you get off yourself and onto others, you'll not only be ahead of those 90% of brands that aren't purposeful, you'll be ahead of 80% of those purposeful brands who are talking in a self-directed way. So there's no easy way through it. You do have to do the heavy lifting and be kind to yourself so you don't spread yourself too thin. But if you have a specific point of view and you consistently commit to be community facing in your content and the way you communicate in channels and really respond and engage with your community, you'll inspire maybe 5 people at first to follow your community. Those 5 people can bring on another 10 and it will grow over time. But it's the authenticity and integrity of your commitment and your focus on them that will drive your success. Another question, Elizabeth, how would you see this rollout happening with a solopreneur that's attempting to be an influencer? Because there isn't so much a product or service per se, but she's raising awareness with brands that she's an influencer. I mean, basically you're launching a personal brand. And, having done that myself with a book, I had no idea about the whole game going into it. I was a full-time staff ad guy, and then I wrote a book because I wanted to share some ideas, but I was just clueless about even wanting to be a personal brand or any of that sort of thing. Now it's like, duh. So now I realize that you need to be very conscious and intentional about it. And so what does that mean? It means you need to create a plan. You need to be very conscious about, okay, what you want to stand for to establish your authority credentials. What is going to be your calling card? So the most obvious example is a book, but if it's not a book, it might be a white paper. It might be a webinar series. A lot of people are leveraging podcasts very effectively nowadays. So what is the medium that you want to use to raise the awareness of your authority credentials? And then in truth, when you ask, how do you raise awareness of you to brands? Brands understandably have limited bandwidth and time, and they want to work with influencers, but those influencers have to bring something to the table. And what they need to bring is reach and community reach. And not just reach, they need to have an engaged community. You'll see recently that Unilever and other big brands came out and said, we want to get rid of these false metrics, these bot metrics that so many influencers are using to establish their credentials, yet when a brand works with them and pays them for that, they're actually getting no ROI because they're not even real people. And so brands are very aware of vanity metrics, of bots, of all these other things that some influencers have been using to kind of up their game. And so I know for a fact, because we often look to influencers to support the brands we work with, the authenticity of the brand, the depth of the connection to your community, The ability of you, when you reach out to your community, to move the needle on behalf of a brand partner is what counts. And so, backing up to your question, get very clear about what you want to be an authority on and be able to articulate that in a way that's differentiated to competitors. Get very clear about what your calling card is, whether it's a podcast series, whether it's a book, whatever it might be. And then make sure that you build, you work until you have a community of eyeballs that are deeply engaged that brand partners would want to work with. Takes a little bit of time, but it's very much the normal way these days. I mean, you know, even 2 years ago, using influencers was still a bit of a question mark. Now we've got influencer agencies and micro influencers and all these different things. So the marketplace is definitely there. And Russell, what are your thoughts about B2B companies using the approaches you've shared here? Does it apply? You know, it's an interesting question, and we get it sometimes, especially with clients. Absolutely. I don't think there is a B2B company anymore. I think B2B is B2C. Why? Because consumers look behind the retailer or, you know, whoever they buy from to see who's the supplier, who made the product. And because of that, customers, retailers are looking to work with B2B companies that mitigate risk, that demonstrate a values alignment, and actually give them a story to tell at point of sale. So if you're sitting there as a retailer and they're like, should I use vendor A or vendor B? And this one over here is purposeful. They have values. They have a story that makes them defensible in the marketplace. And the one over here has exactly the same products with similar benefits and features and price. You're going to go with the one that's clearly purposeful. Also, the power of purpose in a B2B company, especially with sales teams, is you establish dynamics that are relational rather than transactional. Because there's only so far you can go when you're trying to beat each other up on price all the time. Instead, if you actually go in there and train your sales team to say, listen, hey, it's great to meet you. I know we've had these contracts in the past, or this is a new contract. Before we talk about our products and what might be possible, we'd love to talk a little bit about our company and what we care about, and we'd love to hear more about the same. A, because that's important to us outright, and B, because we know it's really important in the marketplace today. When you frame things that way, you have a relational dynamic going on that when it comes to doubling down and increasing their orders with you or choosing between you and another vendor, it'll win the day every time. And it's a very, very powerful pitch from an emotional point of view for your sales teams. So, and we have Jules. And we probably have the last question we have time for, and then we're going to, please, if you have any other questions, do send them in as soon as you can, and we'll follow up by email and share them with you. What are the pitfalls in leading a movement that confronts taboos? I sell a product that involves sexuality, menstruation, and it's hard to get people to share it. I think it's really interesting. I think more and more, not only here in the United States, but culturally around the world, we have to be taking on sensitive issues, whether it's anything from same-sex marriage and the right to choose whoever you want to love, through to self-identity in the beauty category, through to menstruation and feminine hygiene products. I mean, you look at what Always has done with Like a Girl. I think it's a great example. I do think to some degree you need to make the topic more accessible. You don't need to use shock or drama or go so directly at the topic that it might potentially alienate some people. What Always did was they looked at the kind of, feminine hygiene category, and they launched a campaign Like a Girl. And what they did was they were really looking at the issue of the products they were supplying, providing, and said, really, it's an issue of confidence at the heart of the issue. It's a question of self-esteem. It's a question of giving young ladies the sense of self-possession to feel good about themselves at a particularly challenging period of their lives, or, there are changes going on. And, I don't mean to speak for that period of life at all. I have no idea, but I do have two young daughters, 18 and 16, so I have some understanding, I guess. And so they really they addressed the stereotype of what it means to be a girl, that a girl is somehow less than, by launching this campaign Like a Girl. And what they did is they just celebrated what it means to be a girl and instilled them with confidence. And instead of doing advertising, a lot of which they do, they also complemented with a self-esteem campaign which taught confidence in schools across America. And so what they did was, their strategy was to go in and recognize that at this stage of life, the most powerful thing you can do for a young lady is to give them self-esteem and confidence. And on the strength of that, they build an affinity to the brand that really opened the doorway for them to have a relationship in and around the products they sell. And so as you look at these issues, you need to look at them not just through the product lens, which, you know, can kind of unearth these taboo topics, but really look at the emotional driver behind it and say, how can we address this issue, walk in through that emotional door, rather than, you know, speak directly to the products, to provide context for those products in a way that's going to be relevant and meaningful to people. And, you know, I think there's a huge opportunity for all brands now, and particularly the one, you know, that you're bringing to life, to take on these issues and foster understanding. And I also increasingly think marketing is becoming education. If you look at Tesla, if you go into a Tesla showroom, they don't try and sell you the car. They educate you about the car and what difference that makes to the environment, to your experience, and so on. And that gives you bragging rights to other people, and that makes you want to buy the car. And so, you know, think about how you can emotionally connect with people. Think about how you can educate them about the issue in a way that will then position your product or service in a way that they're very interested. And that's just a much more relatable human way in. So I hope that's helpful. You know, if you want more, firstly, I want to thank everyone for their time on a Friday morning. For those on the East Coast of the US, you're now even more dangerously close to the weekend. Thank you for those here on the West Coast and in the middle of the country on a Friday, and to those all around the world. We really, really appreciate and value your time. We hope this is valuable to you. We will answer any other questions that you'll have shared that we didn't get to in an email. And if you are passionate about defining your personal purpose, to really find that fulfillment you want in life and to bring your best self to work into your personal life, take a look at wefirstworks.com. If you are a solopreneur, a startup, an entrepreneur, a small or high growth company, you want to go to the next level, have a look at We First Works in terms of defining your company and activating your company purpose, because in our experience, that is what the leading brands are doing today for all the reasons I mentioned on this course. And we consciously put it together to support you. So again, thank you for all your time. I really, really appreciate it. We look forward to the next webinar and really hope this was helpful. All righty. Thanks so much.